Hello, everyone. We're back with Ken Dombrowski, Executive Life Coach and Master Hypnotist. And today I want to talk about something that I think we kind of dance around a lot, but have never really just flat out made a video on. And that's the concept of nature versus nurture. What are we thinking? Because I personally think they both super matter, but which one seems to be where it's really rooted?
Well, of course, yes, they both matter. But what we find, throughout humanity is that nature is going to be more powerful influence than nurture. Nurture still has influence. Nurture still can kind of help guide and take a person in a direction. But nature, that's who you are. What we call your constitution of a person is who you are when you came into the world. Like when you came out of the womb, who were you at that point? Who were you already formed as a being? Your spirit, energy, the type of person you are. So now you're going to get that, obviously, from your parents, because they're the ones who made you, obviously. So for years before you were even conceived, your parents already had who they were, and then they're passing that on to you. That's the nature part of it. And then if you're born, nurture comes in, your same parents, we say this all the time, we're in a softer society where it's hard to say and hard to hear. People get mad, but it's becoming more and more weak all the time, weaker and weaker and weaker. Well, that's because the nature of people they're being born to weak parents, and then they're being nurtured by weak parents and a weak collective society. So all that together is just validating that weakness and then celebrating it as though it's strength or progression or being woke or something good. So nature versus nurture, nature is going to be the one that dominates the huge majority of the time. But like I say, right now we have nature and nurture are kind of in alignment with each other. So what do we say? I have to say this sometimes when people bring us, kids to, we get parents who bring us children that their child is not performing the way that they would want. And that might be at a sport or at school. And so parents might have these really high expectations for their child. Oh, my child, I know that he or she is capable of getting straight A's. They're just being lazy. I want you to hypnotize them into doing more schoolwork and doing it better. I work with children on this all the time, and I get to a point where I have to explain to the parents that we cannot take an entrepreneur and turn him into an artist, nor can we take an artist and turn them into an entrepreneur. That's just who this person is. You have to be okay with that your child might not be the smartest kid in their class.
Right.
That's got to be okay and acceptable. But if it's not, and you keep on wanting to change the nature of this child into something else through nurture, you're going to be disappointed a lot.
That makes sense. I mean, you taught me that, like, growing up, like, play to your strengths kind of thing, because, like, you straight up said, like, if you weren't good at school, then you'd be having a job, you'd be doing X, Y, Z, because we would know that, like, maybe intellectually that's not your suit. So let's go find the thing that is, So I think that makes total sense. And there's, obviously so many situations where it can get, crossed, because, there's always going to be the outside factors that you're not trying to contribute with that are going to end up being part of nature, going to be part of nurture, because I think society is doing just as much nurturing as parents are these days. So obviously that's going to have a role in things. And then also your most formative ages are conception to 7, and people still seem to not really be grasping that. Even though they know it, they're not grasping that. So like whatever happens to that mom, that family during that pregnancy, that's straight nature for the child. So there's going to be so many things that even though you may not outwardly be trying to do anything, they're going to have an effect on the nature versus nurture discussion. Obviously, like everything else we talk about, it's going to change as society changes. The more technologically advanced we get, the way this feels is going to differ. We're not talking about hunting and gathering. We're talking about social media posts and news blasts. It's a lot different than what other people may have experienced at a different time. But there's something you said before we actually started this video that I think is a really good illustration. And you said, nature is like your subconscious, where like those mechanisms lie, like who you are and what you do in routine. And nurture is going to be conscious, where you let those outside factors have a say in the way you think, feel, react. It's not what was always there. It's what you let kind of be created. And I think that's very important, because that's a really good illustration for me to understand the difference between the two.
Yeah, it's a really great point to bring up, because what we look at is that your subconscious makes up about 92% of your overall mind space and energy, while your conscious is the other 8%. So 8% versus 92%. So that's where we say whatever's happening in the subconscious, it's all about survival. That's where your nature is going to be. So it's going to dominate at least 92% of the time. The other 8% is going to be mildly influenced by your conscious and your nurture out in the world. So we see this, I see this with adoption. This becomes this is just so hard to see this happen. Worked with countless people who were adopted, and the reason they were put up for adoption usually is because their mother was addicted to drugs. Had something very, very negative going on. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't just a temporary blip in the screen, like the mother lived this really great, incredible puritanical life, and then whoopsie, she got pregnant, at 19 years old and decided, that does happen, but a majority of the time it's going to be because that mother and whoever the father might be, they don't have the ability. They have problems, money problems, attitude problems, can't keep a job. They're going to have problems with drugs, alcohol, all kinds of negative stuff. Now, that child can be adopted at birth by the most wonderful, caring, loving, nurturing family you could possibly imagine. Have all the resources, have everything in alignment for that baby, but that baby still grows up to have those exact same tendencies that their birth parents had, even though they never met their birth parents. That's nature versus nurture in a very unfortunate way.
I think that's like the best case for explaining why nature matters more than nurture than anything, because it is true. Like all of the individuals we've seen that are adopted, whether they be adults, teenagers, kids, when we see them, there's an obvious like disconnect between the people that chose to raise them and the people that were most likely involved in creating them. Obviously, not to say these families are wrong, these kids shouldn't be taken in. That's not what we're saying. It's just you're kind of like working with a set of cards that you don't know what you're getting. And that's really something that needs to be understood. Like, that's why I think the foster system has so many issues inside of it, because like these foster parents are dealing with such a mixed bag, and they end up not being able to nurture properly, and they end up being super unfit homes, because like you can only do so much, and just as much things can start with good intentions, they go wonky, because it's just impossible to try and work with some of these situations and get a positive result easily.
I'm kind of reminded a little bit about, there's a somewhat known for many, many years about Russian orphanages. Orphanages, am I saying this right? Orphanages in Russia. And this is known. This is not something terribly profound. That when we're talking tiny infants, they refuse, and they meaning the people who are caring for these babies in the orphanage, they shall not pick that baby up and care and cuddle it and hold it and make it feel. To them, it's all about, okay, whoever adopts that baby, that should be the person who gives it its nurturing, so then the baby imprints on that adopted parent. And hey, you know what? In theory, that makes great sense.
Right.
However, what that also does is not only has that child have a lifelong feeling of rejection and abandonment from its natural birth parents, natural birth parents, it is now being raised in an environment, they're in this unbelievably formative age, as being a baby, that they don't deserve love, nurturing, warmth, and things like that. So then they tend to grow up to be very cold, very unloving, very, very difficult people to get along with, because that's their nature.
Right.
So here again, I've personally known countless people who have adopted a Russian baby, flew to Russia, adopted an infant, brought it home, and then when that child becomes teenage years, very, very difficult, very hard to control, very hard to manage, because they just feel so rejected by their parents, their family. Their nature is to just be so very independent,
right,
that they don't need those parents is kind of the attitude. And so we see that again and again also.
Do you have an example of when like nurture won? Because I can't even think of one. Like, would you be an example of that?
Well, yeah, actually, I guess I would be.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't even think of that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, no, I of course, as I'm very open about my upbringing. My parents both had problems with drugs and alcohol. My parents actually both told me many times when I was a small child that they wanted to get an abortion with me, that they did not want to have me. They already had 2 children. They did not want a third one. So that tells you the circumstances of how I came into the world. That was my nature. My nature from conception. As soon as they found out they were pregnant with me, they automatically did not want me. That was a feeling of rejection and abandonment and unworthy and unloved and all that kind of stuff. But then what happened was, after I got through, childhood and going into my teenage years, I started looking at this. I don't know that I want to be part of this anymore, because it just doesn't make sense to me. But I still did, because that was my family. I did what I was told and did what I was expected. But then by the time I got in my 20s and mid-20s, I thought, no. I just don't want to. I don't want to see. I see the example. I see where my life is leading, because my parents are showing me. Broke all the time, pissed all the time, angry, jealous, rage, hostility, just mean people. I don't want that. So my nature and my nurture was to be an alcoholic and a drug addict and a narcissist and a mean person. I then nurtured myself into something different. So that was really a great example that I didn't even think of.
Yeah, because it's like it's hard, because you don't really hear of something where nurture wins, but that's because it really is kind of the exception to the rule. That's why so many people end up in the same situation as their parents or whatever it may be, because just your circumstances kind of dictate your capabilities to a certain extent.
Yeah, well, that's actually going to bring into another video for us to do about being a Sigma. So I'm considered a Sigma man, a Sigma empath man. So I believe that Sigmas are created through their environment. So someone who has an extremely adverse environment growing up can either become a narcissist or there's a whole lot of different possibilities. The big extremes are going to be narcissist or a Sigma, and there are far more narcissists than there are Sigmas.
Yeah, because it's like you really have to kind of be the exception to the rule. Most things in society are going to help you be more negative, not more positive. That's just kind of how it's built. It's the basic mechanisms for some reason is to lean negative as a society. Yeah. I can't blame that on technology. I think that was there prior, but it's just enhanced with that. As much as I like to blame technology for everything. But yeah, I mean, nature versus nurture, I think it'll always be a discussion. I think the topic is always changing, but for the most part, overall, barring some exceptions, nature's going to be doing a lot more of the deciding than nurture ever will.
Yeah, that was really all good stuff right there. Yeah, thank you for that one.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing a little bit about yourself in case someone didn't already know.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much for watching this video. If you want to learn more about nature versus nurture, please give us a call today or visit our website. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you very much.